The grand halls of the Carter estate gleamed beneath the shimmer of countless crystal chandeliers, each light scattering across the polished marble floor like broken rainbows. Imani Carter stood before a towering mirror in her bridal suite, her reflection showing a vision in ivory silk stitched with the finest Belgian lace. At just 23, she carried the natural beauty of a woman untouched by vanity, skin smooth and radiant like deep bronze warmed by sunlight. Dark almond eyes that seemed to hold unspoken poetry, and long natural curls styled into waves that cascaded gracefully down her back. But today, that beauty did not shine with joy. It was muted by resignation. "You look breathtaking, darling," Evelyn Carter declared, fussing with her daughter's veil for the 10th time. Evelyn's sharp cheekbones and silver-streaked bun gave her an air of authority, one that left little room for defiance. Her voice was clipped with satisfaction as she continued, "Malik Harrington is the finest man you'll ever meet. You should feel blessed." Imani's slender fingers trembled as they grazed the pearl necklace resting against her collarbone. A wedding gift from her soon-to-be husband, cold against her skin, it felt more like a chain than a treasure. She whispered, her voice breaking slightly, "I barely know him. We've only met 3 times." Evelyn's eyes hardened. "Love is a luxury you cannot afford. Your father's debts are suffocating us. This marriage is not just is your family's salvation?" Through the tall glass windows, Imani looked out over the gardens where she had once played as a child, running barefoot through roses and daydreaming of a love story that would sweep her off her feet. Those dreams had withered, crushed beneath duty, obligation, and desperation. Meanwhile, in another wing of the estate, Malik Harrington adjusted the platinum cufflinks on his tailored jacket. At 29, he had built Harrington Global from a small tech startup into a sprawling international empire worth billions. His jawline was sharp, his dark hair meticulously groomed, and his piercing eyes brown like molten iron. Attention with every glance. A man who knew what he wanted and took it. Still time to back out, Andre Williams, his best friend and business partner, teased as he handed him a glass of champagne. Malik smirked, but his gaze was fixed out the window on the gathering crowd: politicians, celebrities, business moguls, the entire circle of the elite. "This isn't about backing out, Dre. This is about building the future. The Carter's connections open doors I need in Europe. And the Bridewell, she's a bonus." Andre raised a brow knowingly. Malik's tone was casual, but he remembered the quiet moments when Malik had spoken of Imani after their brief encounters. She had been polite, almost too polite, but her silence had left an imprint on him. Something about her restraint, the way her eyes always drifted away as if she carried secrets in her soul, intrigued him more than he cared to admit. The processional music began, and 300 guests rose to their feet. Imani appeared at the far end of the aisle on her father's arm. David Carter, once a powerful businessman, now wore the weary look of a man beaten by financial ruin. His hands shook slightly as he held onto his daughter, knowing he was trading her happiness for his family's survival. Step by step, Imani moved forward. To the guests, she was the picture of grace, glowing in her bridal gown. But to her, every stride was a march toward a gilded prison, where her freedom and her heart would be locked away. Malik stood at the altar, expression unreadable as he watched her approach. Yet when their eyes met, for just a fleeting second, he caught the fear in her gaze, carefully hidden, but impossible for a man like him to miss. For the first time, something like guilt pierced his unshakable composure. The vows were recited. Imani's voice was soft, a whisper that sounded like surrender rather than devotion. Malik's responses, on the other hand, were sharp and certain, spoken with the confidence of a man finalizing a contract. When the minister declared them husband and wife, their kiss was a brief brush of lips, formal, hollow, and felt by neither. The reception was an endless parade of wealth and applause. They sat together at the head table like two mannequins, faces painted with practiced smiles while guests offered congratulations wrapped in business proposals. Imani barely touched her food, her stomach nodded with unease. "You're not eating," Malik murmured during a rare quiet moment. His voice was deep, steady, unexpectedly gentle. "I'm not very hungry," she replied softly, stealing a sideways glance at him. He looked at home here, powerful and in control, while she felt like a stranger dressed in borrowed finery. "Do you enjoy dancing?" he asked, nodding toward the couples swaying on the floor. "I used to," she admitted, remembering nights when she had spun barefoot to music in her childhood bedroom. For the first time that day, Malik studied her not as a business transaction, but as a woman, cloaked in sadness, hiding behind beauty. He offered his hand. "Perhaps we should give them the dance they expect." Her heart clenched at the word, expect. This entire day, this entire union, was about everyone else's expectations. Still, she placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the floor. They swayed together like strangers forced into an embrace, pretending at love while the world applauded. And as the music echoed through the ballroom, Imani Carter realized she had entered into a marriage that might look like a fairy tale but already felt like a cage. The reception dragged late into the night. A dazzling display of wealth and power that meant nothing to Imani. She smiled when required, shook hands when introduced, and nodded politely when praised, but her heart remained heavy. Every laugh from the crowd, every toast to their union, sounded like a hollow echo inside her chest. When the last of the guests finally departed and the ballroom doors closed behind them, Imani followed Malik into the waiting limousine. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, neon reflections bouncing across her gown. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the steady hum of the engine and the faint sound of tires gliding across the pavement. Imani's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her pulse hammering with dread. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in the days leading up to the wedding. The wedding night, she had feared it, prayed against it, even cried over it when no one was looking. Now, with every passing second, the reality pressed harder against her ribs. "My home has several guest rooms," Malik said suddenly, his deep voice cutting through the suffocating silence. Imani's head snapped toward him, her breath caught. "Guest rooms," she repeated faintly. "Yes," he replied, his tone steady but softer than before. "I assumed you would want your own space. This arrangement is new for both of us. There's no need to rush into anything that makes you uncomfortable." For a moment, she simply stared at him, the weight of his words slowly sinking in. Relief flooded through her body so quickly that her eyes stung with tears. She had been bracing herself for demands she wasn't ready to meet, for the cold reality her mother had described as a wife's duty. Instead, Malik offered space-distance time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion she could not hide. He turned his gaze to her then, really looking at her. The faint shimmer of tears in her eyes stirred something in him, a strange pang of guilt, of tenderness he had not expected to feel tonight. Whatever he had imagined about this marriage, a trembling bride on the verge of tears had not been part of it. "Imani," he said quietly, her name falling from his lips for the first time that day, "this doesn't have to be difficult. We can take things slowly." The limousine pulled to a stop before Skyline Tower, Malik's penthouse rising like a glass crown into the night sky. The building itself was a symbol of his empire, sleek, towering, impossible to ignore. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed beneath golden lights as staff hurried to greet them, but Imani felt none of the grandeur. To her, it was another cage, even more polished than the last dot. When they reached the penthouse, Malik guided her down a corridor lined with modern art and tall windows that looked out over the city's glittering skyline. Every step she took echoed against polished stone floors, reminding her how far she had been pulled from the simple home she once knew. He opened a door at the end of the hallway and revealed a stunning guest suite, complete with its own lounge, walk-in closet, and a marble bathroom larger than her childhood bedroom. "This will be yours," he said, his voice calm, controlled, businesslike. "I had clothing sent in, based on your measurements from the wedding dress. If you need anything, let me know." Imani stepped inside, her breath catching at the sheer elegance surrounding her. Everything was perfect, from the silk sheets to the crystal vases, yet it all felt cold, foreign, like a life that did not belong to her. She forced herself to speak, though her words felt empty. "It's beautiful." "Good night, Imani," Malik said from the doorway. His tall figure outlined against the soft glow of the hallway lights. She turned, surprised at the simplicity of his farewell. "Good night," she whispered back. When the door closed, Imani's composure crumbled. She sank onto the silk-covered bed, her chest tightening as the reality of it all crashed over her. She was now Imani Harrington, wife to one of the wealthiest men in the country, living in a palace of glass and gold, and, yet, she felt as though she had lost everything that truly mattered. She rose and crossed to the writing desk by the window, where the city lights twinkled below like scattered stars. From her small travel bag, she retrieved her most cherished possession, a leather-bound journal, a gift from her late grandmother. It had been her refuge since girlhood, the one place she could be wholly honest. With trembling fingers, she opened it and pressed her pen to the page. Day 1, tonight, I became the wife of a stranger. He is handsome, wealthy, and powerful, everything Mama told me to want. But he does not know that I have never even held a man's hand before today. He does not know that the thought of intimacy terrifies me. Because Mama always said it was something women endure, not something they enjoy. He does not know that I paint in secret, because Mama said art is a waste of time. He does not know anything about me at all. How can I share a life with someone who does not know my soul? When she finally set her pen down, some of the tightness in her chest eased. Closing the journal, she hid it in the drawer beneath decorative paper, as she had always done. It would remain her only sanctuary in this new life. And as the city lights glowed beyond the glass, Imani Harrington lay awake, not as a bride fulfilled, but as a prisoner cloaked in silk. The Skyline Tower penthouse was everything the world imagined. Luxury to be stretched across the top floor of the tallest building in the financial district. Its walls made of glass that opened to endless views of the glittering city below. Inside, polished marble gleamed under soft golden lights, abstract art filled the hallways, and furniture was arranged like pieces in a designer showroom. Every room whispered wealth, precision, control. For Imani, it felt like walking into a museum where she did not belong. The beauty was undeniable, but so was the emptiness. Each detail reminded her of how far she was from home, how little of herself existed here. Her guest suite was magnificent, but it wasn't hers. The gowns hung in the closet were expensive, chosen without her input. The jewelry in velvet boxes sparkled like captured fire, but felt heavier than chains. The silk sheets, the marble counters, the crystal vases, everything was perfect. But nothing was hers. She sat by the wide window one morning, the city spread before her like an ocean of lights and steel. She thought of her father, recovering from his recent heart scare, and of her mother, who now lived with her chin high, as if this marriage had already redeemed the Carter family's reputation. They had what they wanted, the debts were covered, their family name was safe. But Imani had never felt so alone. That night, after Malik retreated to his own quarters, she returned to the antique desk in her suite. With steady hands, she pulled out her journal and began to write. Day 3. This penthouse is larger than anything I've ever known. But I feel smaller than I ever have. I walk through hallways lined with paintings that cost more than my father's yearly income, and yet they leave me cold. Malik is polite. Distant, but polite. He treats me with respect, but I feel like a stranger in his world. At dinner, he asks how I find the city. I smile and say it's beautiful. But the truth is, I feel like I'm suffocating behind glass walls. The act of writing soothed her. Each page became a small release of the emotions she dared not show anyone, not her mother, not her father, not Malik. Days blended into each other. Malik often left early for Harrington Global, his empire demanding his presence. When he returned, he sometimes tried to speak to her over dinner. The conversations were careful, light, circling around the weather, art galleries, the latest headlines. But never around the one thing that stood between them, intimacy. He noticed her hesitation, her quick excuses to leave the table, her polite but firm barriers. Each night, when the city fell quiet, she disappeared into her guest room, closing the door between them. On the seventh night, he came to her at breakfast, his shirt still crisp from an early morning meeting. His voice was calm, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Did you sleep well?" Imani lifted her gaze briefly, then back down to her teacup. "Yes, thank you," she replied. Though she had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, her mind tangled in questions. He studied her for a moment. The slight shadows beneath her eyes betrayed her lie, but he said nothing. Instead, he nodded. "Perhaps tonight we can share dinner properly. Just the two of us. No staff hovering, no distractions." Her heart thudded with panic. Dinner together meant conversation, vulnerability, perhaps even closeness. She forced a faint smile. "That sounds nice." That evening, they sat across from each other at a table so long, it could have hosted 20 guests. The meal was flawless, served by discreet staff who vanished as soon as the plates were set. Malik tried asking about her favorite foods, her favorite music, whether she had traveled. She answered softly, politely, giving him only the surface of herself. When he suggested a film afterward, she excused herself with feigned exhaustion. The pattern continued for days. Malik, patient but firm, tried to draw her out. Flowers arrived. In her room, he suggested walks on the terrace, drives through the city, shared breakfasts. Each time, she nodded politely but slipped back behind her invisible wall. In her journal. The truth spilled out, day 7. "He brought me roses today. White roses. They smelled like heaven, and for a moment I almost thanked him with more than just a polite smile. But then Mama's voice came back to me. A wife's role is duty. A wife's role is sacrifice. A wife's role is to endure. I can't let myself forget that. I want to believe Malik is different. He has been kind, patient, but what if kindness doesn't last? What if patience turns into anger? It's safer to keep my distance, even if it feels colder every day." Malik did not know it, but the distance between them was becoming unbearable for him too. In business, he understood people with ease, could predict their moves before they made them. But with Imani, he felt like a man blindfolded, trying to touch something he could not grasp. She was beautiful, yes, but she was a ghost in his home, her presence felt but never fully seen. And so the penthouse remained what it had been since the first night, an elegant prison. For her, a cage of expectations. For him, a reminder that all the wealth and power in the world could not buy what he now found himself quietly longing for. His wife's trust. Night after night, the same pattern unfolded inside the glass palace of Skyline Tower. Imani would sit through dinner at the long marble table. Her answers measured, her smile polite, and then she would retreat to the safety of her guest suite. Behind the closed door, she could breathe again, though her heart never slowed until she was alone. Malik had expected many things from this marriage. A graceful companion at his side for business events. A family in the future to carry the Harrington name. Even the possibility of discovering a true partner. But he had not expected this ghost of a wife, beautiful yet untouchable, always slipping away just when he thought he was drawing near. On the 8th night, he stood by the tall windows of his study, the city lights burning far below him. In the boardroom, he was a man of certainty, bending markets to his will, but here, in his own home, he felt powerless. He could not read her, could not break through the invisible wall she had built brick by brick around herself. Meanwhile, Imani sat at her desk, her journal open, the ink flowing as freely as the fears she dared not say aloud. Day 8, tonight. He asked me again to sit with him after dinner. I told him I was tired. It was easier than saying the truth, that being near him makes me tremble. Not because I dislike him, but because I do not know how to be what he expects. Mama always said a wife must give without question, must meet her husband's needs without hesitation. But what if I fail? What if he sees me as weak, unworthy? He has been nothing but kind, but kindness feels like something I don't know how to trust. I think he believes I'm cold. I'm not, I'm just. Afraid Malik did not see these words, but he felt their shadow. He felt it each time she avoided his gaze, each time her voice faltered, each time she excused herself from a moment that could have drawn them closer. By the 10th night, the weight of rejection pressed harder. He would lie in his bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing she was just a few doors away. His wife, his partner in name, but nothing more. It was not the absence of intimacy that tormented him, it was the mystery of her silence. He wanted to know her, to see the woman hidden behind the polite replies and careful smiles, but every attempt he made only seemed to push her further away. Still, he did not force her. He could have. His position, his power, the vows they had spoken gave him every right. But Malik Harrington was not a man who wanted obedience. He wanted something real, and the absence of it gnawed at him like an emptiness no wealth could fill. In the quiet hours, when the city outside pulsed with life, Imani's pen never stopped. Day 11. I heard him moving down the hall tonight. For a moment, I thought he might knock. My heart raced at the thought. Part of me wanted him to. And yet, I prayed he wouldn't. What would I do if he walked through that door? What would he think if he knew I had never even been kissed properly? He deserves someone who knows how to be a wife. I am not that woman. I don't think I ever will be. The distance was no longer just physical, it was becoming emotional quicksand. She retreated deeper into herself with every sunset, while he grew more restless with every dawn. 8 nights had passed, and in the penthouse of Skyline Tower, the golden cage gleamed brighter than ever. But for both husband and wife, it was nothing more than a prison. One where duty had trapped them together, yet fear kept them forever apart. 2 weeks into the marriage, Malik entered the breakfast room with a crisp envelope in hand. His expression was serious, his suit already tailored for a long day at Harrington Global. Sliding the invitation across the marble table, he said simply, "There's a gala next weekend. It's important for the company, for our reputation. You'll attend with me." Imani picked up the envelope, her pulse quickening as she read the golden embossing. The annual Royal Heights Charity Gala. She had heard of it before, a night where the most powerful people in the city gathered under chandeliers, where cameras flashed and reputations were sealed. Her stomach tightened. Hundreds of eyes would be on her, hundreds of smiles to fake, hundreds of questions she wasn't ready to answer. "How many people will be there?" she asked softly. 300, maybe more. Malik's tone was clipped, efficient, but there was something softer in his eyes as they met hers. "We will need to present ourselves as a united couple. Dance, mingle. Show the world our marriage is solid." He paused for the briefest moment before adding, "successful." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Their marriage was anything but successful. On the evening of the gala, stylists filled her suite with the tools of transformation. Silk gowns in shades of midnight and emerald, diamond earrings that sparkled like fire, makeup brushes that swept across her skin until she hardly recognized herself. When she finally emerged, she was draped in deep sapphire silk that hugged her form and spilled like water onto the floor. Her natural curls were swept into a regal updo, and a necklace of diamonds caught the light at her throat. Malik stood waiting near the door, adjusting his cufflinks. But when he saw her, his breath caught. For the first time since their wedding, his eyes softened, stripped of their usual distance. "You look stunning," he said quietly. And for once, it did not sound like politeness. Heat rose to her cheeks, foreign and unsettling. "Thank you," she whispered. The limousine ride to the hotel was filled with Malik's low voice, briefing her on names, titles, who to greet first, who mattered most. But his words barely reached her. Her heart raced with every block they drove closer, her nerves tightening like a string pulled to taut. The grand ballroom of the Royal Heights Hotel glittered like a dream. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, white roses spilled from tall vases, and golden light bathed the room in warmth. Cameras flashed as Malik and Imani entered arm in arm, the perfect picture of a power couple. His hand rested firmly at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. Steady and possessive, while she smiled as though the world were hers. Mrs. Harrington. You're even more beautiful than the photographs suggested, said Senator Wallace, an elderly man with kind eyes. Your husband is a very lucky man. Imani's smile, for once, came easily. Thank you, Senator. Malik speaks highly of you. Malik's head turned sharply, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if surprised by her poise. He had not expected her to slip into the role so seamlessly, but she did, conversing with the wives of executives, accepting compliments, even laughing softly at their stories of travel and art. For a moment, he saw a different version of her, not the silent shadow in his penthouse, but a woman who could command a room without effort. When the orchestra struck the first notes of a waltz, Malik turned to her and extended his hand. Shall we dance, Mrs. Harrington? Her pulse jumped. She wanted to refuse, but hundreds of eyes were already watching, waiting. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, and he led her to the center of the floor. The music swelled, and suddenly, they were surrounded by couples moving in perfect rhythm. Malik's hand settled firmly at her waist, his other holding hers with a confidence that steadied her trembling. At first, her body resisted, stiff with nerves. But as he guided her across the floor, something shifted. His touch was not forceful, it was certain. His movements were not demanding, they were protective. You're a natural, he murmured, his lips near her ear, his breath warm against her skin. My grandmother taught me, she replied, before she could stop herself. She said dancing was like painting with your body. His eyes softened. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. In that moment, she was not a prisoner of duty or fear. She was simply a woman dancing in the arms of her husband, and the world around them, the flashing cameras, the murmuring crowd faded away. When the song ended, applause filled the air, breaking the spell. They stepped apart, their smiles slipping back into masks. But something had changed. A crack had formed in the wall between them, fragile, yet undeniable. For the first time, both Imani and Malik wondered if this marriage, built on duty, might hold the faintest possibility of something more. The night of the gala lingered in Malik's mind long after the last guest had gone. The image of Imani moving across the floor, her body aligned with his, her eyes softened for just a heartbeat, he could not shake it. For the first time, he had felt her present, not just standing beside him, but with him. But by morning, the walls had returned. She had retreated again into silence, her smiles polite, her words cautious. The memory of that dance became a cruel tease, showing him what might be possible, only to vanish again behind her careful restraint. Malik was a man who built empires by studying people, by learning what they wanted before they spoke it. Yet here, in his own home, he found himself facing a puzzle he could not solve. What did his wife want? What lay behind her guarded eyes? One afternoon, while Imani was out shopping with the assistant he had assigned her, Malik's search for answers drove him into her suite. He told himself it was curiosity, the need to understand the woman he had married. But beneath that was something else, desperation. Her room was immaculate, as always. Not a wrinkle in the silk bedding, not a book out of place. Yet something felt hidden, as though her true self lived behind locked doors. He moved toward her closet, scanning rows of gowns and shoes he had purchased for her. And then, behind the fabric, he found it. A small easel, folded and tucked away. A stack of watercolor paintings bound in twine. Malik pulled them out carefully, his breath catching as he spread them across the bed. They were breathtaking. Delicate flowers that seemed to bloom from the paper. Sunsets that looked alive, each brushstroke glowing with warmth, faces painted with such depth of emotion, it was as if the subjects might speak at any moment. There was nothing amateur about them. These were the works of someone who felt the world in color, someone who poured pieces of her soul onto canvas. When Imani returned, she stopped dead in the doorway. Malik stood in the center of her room, several of her paintings displayed across the coffee table. Her heart dropped to the floor. Where did you find those? She whispered, her voice trembling. In your closet, Malik admitted. He lifted one, A painting of a garden bathed in soft twilight. These are incredible, Imani. You're not just talented, you're gifted. Her chest tightened, panic clawing its way up her throat. She rushed forward, reaching for the paintings. Please put them back, they're nothing, just silly attempts. He caught her wrist gently, his touch firm but not harsh. Don't dismiss this. These are museum quality. People would pay fortunes to own work like this. Have you ever shown anyone? No. Her voice cracked, her eyes darting. Away, Mama always said, art is impractical, that it's a waste of time for a wife. That I should focus on more important things. Malik's jaw clenched, anger flashing in his eyes. Your mother is wrong. Dead wrong. This isn't a waste of time. This is who you are. For a moment, she looked up at him, and in his gaze, she saw no judgment, only conviction. For just a heartbeat, hope flickered inside her. Could it be that he actually valued this part of her? That he saw beauty in what she had always been told to hide? But fear returned just as quickly. She pulled her wrist back, hugging the stack of paintings to her chest like they were secrets too dangerous to expose. Please, just put them back. Malik studied her for a long moment. He wanted to push, to tell her she was extraordinary, to demand she stop burying her brilliance, but he saw the fear in her eyes, the way her body trembled, as if exposure itself was unbearable. So he nodded quietly. All right. But know this, Imani, I see you. Even when you try to hide, I see you. As he left her room, the words echoed in her chest. He sees me. That night, alone at her desk, she opened her journal once more. Day 18. Malik found my paintings today. He said they were museum quality. No one has ever spoken about them that way. For a moment, I saw myself through his eyes, not as the daughter who disappoints, not as the wife who fails, but as someone who might actually matter. It scared me how much I wanted to believe him. Her hand shook as she closed the journal. She had spent her life being told who she must be. Now, for the first time, someone was asking her to show who she truly was, and that frightened her more than anything. The days after Malik discovered her paintings felt heavier than before. Imani avoided his eyes at breakfast, avoided his touch when he brushed past her, avoided the truth of what his words had stirred inside her. But no amount of distance could quiet the echo of what he had said. I see you. On the 20th day of their marriage, the walls of the penthouse shook with the arrival of Evelyn Carter. She entered unannounced, sweeping past the staff with the force of a storm. Her sharp eyes took in the gleaming marble floors, the priceless artwork, the breathtaking skyline views. And yet, instead of admiration, her lips pressed thin with criticism. My Imani, she said, kissing her daughter's cheek with cold precision. You look thin. Are you not eating properly? A wife must maintain her appearance. Imani stiffened, but said nothing. Evelyn's words had been carved into her since childhood. Malik stepped into the room, greeting her with restrained politeness. Mrs. Carter, a surprise, but welcome. Evelyn's smile was brittle. I thought I would check on my daughter. It's a mother's duty, after all. I wanted to be sure she's adjusting to married life. They sat for tea in the formal living room, though it felt more like a tribunal. Evelyn dominated the conversation with sharp remarks about posture. The way Imani's dress hung on her frame, the way she spoke too softly. And then, with a pointed glance at Malik, she delivered her favorite lecture. A successful marriage, Evelyn declared, requires a woman to know her place. Too much independence can be troublesome for a husband. Malik's hand tightened around his teacup. He looked at Imani, watched her shoulders shrink under her mother's words, watched her lower her eyes in submission. A fire rose in his chest. I actually appreciate Imani's independence, Malik said evenly, his voice carrying weight. She's intelligent, talented. Evelyn's laugh was like ice cracking on stone. Talented. Oh, you mean those little paintings she insists on doing? I've told her countless times such hobbies are inappropriate for a wife. They're distractions. A wife has real responsibilities now. Malik set his cup down, his eyes hard. Her art is extraordinary. It isn't a distraction, it's a gift. The room fell silent. Evelyn's gaze sharpened, but Malik did not flinch. For the first time in her life, Imani saw a man defend her against her mother's dismissals. Her heart raced with something she had never felt before, a dangerous, fragile sense of being protected. When Evelyn finally left, her criticisms trailing behind her like a bitter perfume, Imani retreated to her room. She sat by the window, staring down at the city, her chest tight with confusion. Bolek found her an hour later. She looked so small in the oversized chair, her hands knotted in her lap. "Your mother has strong opinions," he said gently. Imani's lips curved in a weak smile. "She's always been that way. She says she's protecting me from mistakes. And what do you think?" he asked, lowering himself into the chair across from her. Her eyes lifted to his, dark with pain. "I don't know what to think anymore. When I follow her advice, I feel like I'm disappointing you. But when I try to be myself, I feel like I'm disappointing everyone else." Malik leaned forward, his voice low, steady. "Imani, the only person you need to please in this marriage is yourself. I didn't marry your mother's version of who you should be. I married you." Her throat tightened, her eyes filling with tears. "But what if who I really am isn't enough? What if I can't be the wife you need?" He rose and knelt in front of her, his tall frame folding until his eyes met hers. His hand lifted, brushing lightly against her cheek. "Then we'll figure it out together, but first, you have to trust me enough to let me see the real you." Her heart pounded wildly at the warmth of his touch. His eyes, intense, steady, sincere, pulled her closer. She felt the walls inside her trembling, cracking. Malik leaned closer, his lips only inches from hers, waiting, asking silently for permission, and without thinking, she gave the faintest nod. Their breath mingled. The world shrank to that one moment. But then the doorbell rang, sharp and jarring. A voice carried down the hallway as the housekeeper announced another visitor. The spell shattered. Imani's eyes widened, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment. She pulled back, rising quickly from the chair. "I should see who it is." Her words stumbled from her lips as she hurried out of the room, her pulse still racing. Malik remained kneeling, his jaw tight, frustration burning through him. Yet beneath it all was something deeper, something undeniable. Desire. Not just for her beauty, but for her trust. And for the first time, Imani felt it too. The terrifying truth that she wanted to let him in. The almost kiss changed everything. Nothing. In the days that followed, the atmosphere inside Skyline Tower shifted. Every glance between Imani and Malik carried an unspoken weight. Every brush of their hands, every word spoken across the breakfast table, seemed charged with something new, something dangerous. Imani found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he wouldn't notice. The curve of his jaw as he read the morning paper, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel when they rode together, the deep timbre of his voice when he spoke on late-night business calls, and when his eyes met hers unexpectedly, heat flushed her cheeks before she quickly looked away. But with attraction came fear. Mama's voice still echoed in her mind, warning her of men's needs, of the dangers of being too eager, of the shame in desire. And so, when Malik tried to draw closer, she slipped away again, retreating behind the walls she had always known. On the 21st night, Malik invited her to dinner on the balcony beneath the stars. The city glittered below them, the air warm with summer. He poured her wine, his voice gentler than usual. "You look different tonight," he said, his gaze lingering on her face. Imani's hands trembled as she lifted her glass. "I'm fine," she murmured, though her heart was racing. She barely touched her food, too distracted by the nearness of him, by the awareness of his eyes on her. On the 22nd night, he asked her to sit beside him at the grand piano. She hesitated, but agreed, placing her fingers lightly on the keys. Together, they played a simple melody, their hands brushing as they moved in rhythm. The innocent contact sent electricity through her veins. For a moment, she let herself feel it, the warmth, the possibility. But as soon as the final note faded, she excused herself, retreating once more to the safety of her room. By the 23rd night, Malik's patience was thinning. He had given her space. He had tried tenderness, he had offered respect, and, still, every time he reached out, she disappeared. Alone in his living room, staring at the closed door of her suite, he felt more isolated than he had in years. He was married to a woman who fascinated him, who stirred something in him he could not name, and yet she remained as untouchable as smoke. Meanwhile, in her room, Imani poured her soul into the pages of her journal. Day 23. Tonight, when his hand touched mine on the piano, my heart nearly leaped out of my chest. I almost let him kiss me. Almost. For the first time, I wanted it. I wanted to know what it feels like. But Mama's voice filled my head, telling me men lose respect for women who give in, warning me that intimacy is a duty, not a joy. What if she's right? What if Malik sees me differently if I show him what I'm beginning to feel? What if I'm terrible at being a wife? I've never even been kissed properly. How can I be enough for a man who has known the world? It's safer to keep my distance. Safer, though, every day it grows harder. She closed the journal, hiding it in its secret drawer. Unaware that it held the truth, Malik was desperate to understand. On the 24th night, Malik stood alone in the penthouse once more, the weight of rejection pressing down on him. He had conquered industries, commanded nations of men, and yet here, with his own wife, he was powerless. And Imani lay awake, her body aching with conflict, caught between fear and the undeniable pull of the man she had sworn to resist. Both of them trapped, both of them longing, both of them on the edge of a revelation that would shatter everything. The 24th day of their marriage dawned grey and heavy with rain, the clouds pressing low over the city like a mirror of Malik's mood. He had spent another night, restless, pacing his penthouse like a man caged. No deal, no empire, no victory had ever left him so powerless. Imani remained an enigma so close, he could hear her footsteps in the hallway, and yet distant, as if oceans separated them. That afternoon, while she visited her father for a routine checkup at the hospital, Malik wandered the penthouse alone. His frustration built until he found himself standing outside her room. He hesitated, his conscience pulling one way, his desperation another. The door was unlocked. Inside, the suite was spotless, every surface immaculate. But the desk caught his eye, the bottom drawer left slightly ajar. A corner of leather peeking out from beneath decorative paper. His chest tightened. He knew he should walk away. He knew, but his need for answers was stronger than his guilt. He pulled the journal free, his hands heavy as if they carried something sacred. Slowly he opened it. The first entry stopped him, cold day. Day 1, tonight I became the wife of a stranger. He is handsome, wealthy, powerful, everything Mama told me to want. But he doesn't know I have never even held a man's hand before today. He doesn't know that intimacy terrifies me, because Mama said it is something women endure, not enjoy. He doesn't know I paint in secret, because Mama said art is a waste of time for a wife. He doesn't know me at all. Malik's throat tightened. He turned the pages, reading entry after entry, each word striking deeper. Day 7. He brought me flowers, white roses. I wanted to thank him, truly thank him, but Mama's voice in my head told me not to burden him with such things, so I smiled politely and retreated. Day 12. We danced at the gala. For a few minutes, I forgot to be afraid. In his arms, I felt safe. But when the music stopped, so did the illusion. How can I tell him I've never even been kissed? How can I be enough? Day 18. He found my paintings today. He said they were extraordinary. No one has ever spoken about my art that way. For a moment, I saw myself through his eyes, and it scared me how much I wanted to believe him. Each entry stripped away the mystery that had tormented him. This was not rejection. This was fear. This was innocence tangled with shame, taught by a mother who had crushed her daughter's confidence. Long before Malik had entered her life, and then came the most recent page. Day 23. I almost let him kiss me. When his hand touched mine on the piano, I felt things I have never felt before. But Mama's warnings screamed in my mind. What if I lose his respect? What if I fail him? What if he discovers I am nothing like the women he has known? I've never even been kissed. How can I be a real wife to a man like Malik Harrington? Malik closed the journal, his chest heavy, his jaw tight. All the frustration he had carried melted into something else entirely: fierce protectiveness. He had not married a cold, unfeeling woman. He had married someone who had been taught to fear her own desires, to silence her own voice, to shrink her own soul. When Imani returned that evening, she stepped into the living room and froze. Her journal lay open on the coffee table. Malik stood nearby, his expression raw with emotion. Her breath caught. You read it. His voice was rough, weighted. I had to. I was going mad, trying to understand why you kept shutting me out. I needed to know what I was doing wrong. Imani's arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. Now you know the truth. I'm not the wife you deserve. I'm not sophisticated. I'm not experienced. I'm just a scared girl pretending. In a silk gown, Malik's eyes locked on hers, burning with intensity. No. That's not what I read. She shook her head, too ashamed to look at him. But he stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. I read about a woman who sees beauty everywhere she looks. A woman who paints feelings the world doesn't even have words for. A woman who cares so much about doing the right thing that she's willing to sacrifice herself for it. That is who you are. Her eyes filled with tears. But I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be intimate. I don't know how to be a wife. Malik reached out, cupping her face in his hands. Imani, look at me. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, trembling. I don't want a polished, perfect wife who knows every move, he said fiercely. I want you, the woman who blushes when I compliment her. The woman who hides her art but paints like her soul is on fire. The woman who is afraid, but still here with me. That's who I want. Her tears slipped down her cheeks. But I've never even been kissed. What if I disappoint you? His thumb brushed her skin tenderly. Then let me teach you. Not because you have to learn, but because you want to. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here. For a long moment, silence filled the room. And then, with a shaky breath, Imani whispered, I think I want to try. Malik leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But instead, she rose onto her toes, pressing her lips to his in the softest, most innocent kiss. His eyes closed, his heart racing as he deepened it gently, showing her with patience how to move with him, how to let herself feel when they finally broke apart. Her lips tingled, her eyes wide with wonder. That was different than I expected, she whispered. He smiled softly, his gaze warm. Good, different. Her blush answered before her words did. Very good. For the first time in 24 nights, the wall between them cracked wide open, and through that crack, the first light of something real began to shine. The first kiss changed everything. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. For the first time, Imani allowed herself to lean into him. And Malik, true to his word, met her with patience instead of pressure. What followed was not a sudden unraveling, but a gentle awakening, built day by day, moment by moment. But Malik kept his promise. He did not rush her. Instead, he courted his own wife, showing her with tenderness what it meant to be wanted without condition. He brought her fresh canvases and paints, filling a sunlit room with the tools of her secret passion. He sat with her while she worked, not speaking, just watching, as if her brushstrokes were as valuable as any empire he had ever built. He asked about her dreams, and when she whispered them hesitantly, he listened as though they were gospel. And in return, Imani began to trust. She learned that intimacy was not a duty, but a gift. That touch could be gentle, that closeness could be sweet. Their first true night together was nothing like she had feared. It was soft, patient, a celebration of trust, rather than a fulfillment of expectation. For the first time, she discovered that pleasure was not shameful, that desire was not dangerous, and that her body was not something to endure, but something to cherish. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the walls she had built crumbled. She laughed more, smiled more, painted openly. Malik's home became their home, the penthouse no longer a prison but a sanctuary. Where once she had written her fears into her diary, she now filled it with hopes, with memories, with dreams. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sky blush with sunset, Imani confessed, her voice soft but steady. "Mama always told me that good wives submit to their husbands' needs, but never expect to enjoy it themselves." Malik turned to her, his jaw tightening, but his voice calm. "Your mother was wrong. Love is not endurance. It's not sacrifice. It's joy. And with me, it will always be joy for us both." She looked at him with wide eyes, then smiled, small and certain. For the first time in her life, she believed it. 6 weeks after their wedding, she made her choice. Setting down her brush, she walked across the living room and placed her hands on Malik's chest. "I think I'm ready to be your wife, fully." He cupped her face, his eyes fierce yet tender. "Are you sure? We don't have to rush." Her answer was a whisper, but her confidence shone in it. "I want this. Not because I have to, because I choose to." That night became the wedding night they never had. It was tender, passionate, and filled with discovery. Malik guided her with patience, showing her that she had nothing to fear. And when Imani finally let go, she discovered herself not as the frightened girl shaped by her mother's rules, but as a woman capable of love, passion, and trust. From then on, their marriage was no longer a performance, it was real. Months later, Imani stood before her first art exhibition in a downtown gallery. The walls glowed with her watercolors, gardens, sunsets, and portraits that captured emotion in every stroke. Crowds gathered, admirers whispered, collectors made offers. Malik stood beside her, his hand proudly at her waist, as if daring the world to question her brilliance. Even Evelyn Carter appeared, her eyes widening at the sight of her daughter's work. For the first time, her voice carried no criticism, only quiet awe. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I never realized how wrong I was to discourage this." Imani's smile was gentle. "It's never too late to support the people we loved." Later that night, as the gallery emptied, Malik and Imani stood before her favorite Pisa painting of two dancers moving in perfect harmony, their faces glowing with trust. Malik leaned close, his voice low. "No more guest rooms." She turned in his arms, her eyes shining. "No more walls between us. Just us for the rest of our lives." And when they kissed beneath the gallery lights, it wasn't a kiss of duty, or fear, or hesitation. It was the kiss of two people who had finally found in each other what neither had expected: true love. 5 years later, the Harrington penthouse was no longer a cold museum of glass and steel. It was filled with life and laughter. Their son, 3-year-old Malik Jr., darted through the rooms in pursuit of his baby sister, Amara, both of them squealing in delight. Imani watched from her easel in the sunlit art studio Malik had built. For her, one hand resting on her growing belly. Another child was on the way. Another piece of their love, made real. Malik came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Still painting flowers?" he teased gently. "They're not just flowers anymore," she replied, tilting her head back against his chest. On the canvas bloomed roses among broken stone, their colors vibrant against the gray. Their love stories, proof that beauty can grow, even from what seems impossible. He looked at her painting, then at her, his voice low, "Like us." She turned and kissed him, smiling against his lips. "Exactly like us." Outside, the city glowed with its endless lights. But inside their home, the truest light came from the love that had grown where fear once lived, a love that had transformed strangers into soulmates. And for Imani and Malik Harrington, that light would never fade.